All right, in this video, I'm going to explain to you why webinars and email marketing are the ultimate business growth duo. They are the dynamic duo that nobody is talking about or using properly that I've seen. I know a couple of businesses that are leveraging these, but I'm honestly just blown away by how few people that are running marketing agencies or running any kind of brand online, how few of these people are actually using webinars combined with email marketing. So I have this little diagram here. It's just kind of a nice little visual summary of why this is so powerful, because you're going to have people signing up for webinars. Some percentage of them just aren't going to show up, but you're going to have them in your email list. And if you're doing this correctly, your email list is going to funnel them back into your webinars. First and foremost, a webinar is just a fantastic lead magnet. And I know you know what a lead magnet is, but I'll explain it anyway, just to emphasize my point. A lead magnet is just a way of giving your audience something to trade for their information. So they have contact information. You want to give them something in order to get that contact information. That's a lead magnet. You're magnetizing your ideal clients. You're giving them something valuable. They're giving you their something valuable in return, which is their contact information, right? So a webinar is just so good for this because a lot of people use ebooks and free trainings, or maybe they give away some kind of document. And I've used all of those things, all of the above, and they all work, especially if it's like a really good lead magnet. But a webinar is such a good lead magnet because you're literally offering your ideal client, your ideal audience member, you're offering them almost one-on-one time. You're offering them live time with you to solve their problems. So it's just so good. It's so good. It's such a good trade. Like, you're saying, hey, give me your email address and your phone number, and I'm going to give you this webinar presentation that solves this very specific problem. It's just so good. And then the second purpose of the webinar, and the reason you're going to be running webinars in the first place, is that it's just a great way to sell your product or service. So you combine those two things together. You sell your product or services live, and you're also offering something that's just so freaking good and useful for your target audience. It's just awesome. It's two birds with one stone. Everybody wins. Now, the email list, similar. It serves two purposes. The main purpose is to permanently capture people into your ecosystem. You've got probably content that you're putting out on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, whatever. Those people are sort of in your ecosystem, but the problem is, as soon as those people stop signing into the app, they go on vacation, whatever, or maybe they subscribe to too many people, or maybe worse, this happens all the time, the algorithm changes and your stuff just no longer appears in their feed. Those people are now no longer in your ecosystem. You're no longer getting your brand front of mind. The email list allows you to solve this problem. You capture their information. Now you have them. You can get your brand front of mind, because all an email inbox is just like a giant billboard. So you can push your information, your brand, to the top of their inbox every week, or even every day if you need to. And you can stay front of mind, and you make a lot more sales, which brings me to point number 2. Email list is a great way to sell your product or service, just like a webinar is. So a lot of this stuff is obviously, it's pretty obvious. It's fundamental stuff. You know a lot about the how an email list works and a webinar works, but it blows my mind how few people are actually combining these two together. And again, my neat little graphic here that summarizes it. So now let me get into the fundamentals on how you actually set this up properly, because I've done dozens of webinars over the last year, and I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit doing this. And it's just baffling how few people are leveraging this. So the fundamentals are: pick some kind of software. There's a lot of them out there you can run webinars with. They're all kind of the same. They all have the same basic features. Don't overthink this. I use Webinar Jam personally. It has a nice suite of tools, does everything you need it to do. You can also run webinars just on YouTube Live, right? But the problem with that is you have less control. The advantage of using a software like Webinar Jam is you have more control over the audience. You have more control over the analytics. You have more control over the chat itself and how information is presented. So I recommend you use a software. Now, the presentation itself, there's a lot of components here that you want to do. They have to be done in a certain way. So the first thing I put is you want it to be about an hour long. Now, the reason for that is because if it's too short, like if you do a 20-minute webinar, people just kind of feel like they wasted their time. You're going to be spending a lot of energy and time building hype around this presentation. You don't want it to be too short. You also don't want it to be too long because you're competing with all the other platforms out. You're literally competing with TikTok and Netflix when you run a webinar. So you need it to be something good. It needs to be a solid presentation, but don't go too long or too short. An hour, hour and a half is about the sweet spot. The next thing I put here is use Google Slides or a PowerPoint, or what I'm doing right now, which is using a Google Doc. But basically, you just want some way, you're going to have your face on screen like I have right now, but you also want to be able to present information in like a simple bullet point form so that people can take notes, makes the information easier to consume, and it just makes it a little bit more interesting than just you talking to the camera. So I recommend that, Google Slides or a Google Doc. All right, next is to practice the presentation itself to cut out the fluff. And the reason I put this in here is because I've worked with businesses who did presentations and they put no effort into, practicing it or, rehearsing it ahead of time. And the problem is they ended up with a presentation that just had a lot of dead air on it. So there was a lot of them wandering off topic. There was a lot of dead space. You want your presentation to be concise because you don't want to waste people's time. And that brings me to my next point, which is the first 5 minutes of the presentation are the most important. As people are filing in, you kind of want to recapture them, remind them why they're in the presentation. So I'm going to remind you right now why you're watching this. It's because webinars are money printers if you use them correctly. So at the start of your webinar, you're going to reiterate whatever the problem you're solving for these people, why they need to be here, and what they're going to learn from this presentation. That's the first 5 minutes. It sort of hooks them back in. And then, if you're promising some kind of gift, which I'll get into later, but if you've got some kind of attendance gift, you want to remind them, hey, stay till the end. I'm going to give you this thing, this additional bonus thing. And that first 5 minutes will boost your attendance rates. Okay. And then next, you want to frequently engage with the viewers to make them feel seen. So again, the whole point of a webinar is that you're able to engage directly with your target audience. What you're watching right now is pre-recorded on YouTube. So my ideal target audience, which is you, I can't engage directly with you. There's a disconnect. There's a physical disconnect, but there's also a time disconnect. And so if you have any questions or problems, the best thing you can do is just comment down below, which I encourage you to do, but there's just too much of a disconnect. There's not like a live component to it. If this was a live webinar, you'd be able to ask me questions and I would be able to just answer them right there on the spot, which builds that connection, builds that rapport. There's a lot more trust. It feels more authentic, and you're just able to sell products a lot easier that way. That's why a webinar is fundamentally so good for selling stuff, is because you can build that trust one-on-one, even if there's thousands of people watching, you can build that one-on-one engagement, and it allows you to knock down those barriers, and you can just sell products much more easily. All right. And then next, the presentation itself, you want it to solve a specific narrow problem for the audience. You don't want to be super broad and generic. And that brings me to my next point, which is you want viewers to walk away with actionable advice. Those two things go hand in hand. You want it to be a presentation that they actually learn something from. You can't just do a broad presentation and be kind of vague, and you're talking about broad concepts. I've seen people do this. It can work if enough people show up, but really you want to solve a specific problem. Not only will it help get people into the webinar, but it'll also make them feel like they're actually getting something out of it for their time. Next is you want to hammer them with social proof. You have some kind of expertise, you have some kind of offer. Whoever's bought your product, taken your service, whatever, your offer, you want to prove that live on your webinar. You want to show testimonials. Even if you could bring one of your case studies on the webinar. I've seen people run webinars that were just case studies. That's very powerful. But whatever your social proof is, you want to demonstrate that live, and it just makes whatever you're selling hit so much harder. And then again, at the end, you want to pitch your product or service. A lot of business owners, especially inexperienced ones, have a problem with pitching. So what I recommend is you make a pitch pretty early on in the presentation. You let people know ahead of time, like, hey, at the end of this, I am going to pitch you on my coaching program or my school community or whatever it is. You don't have to buy it. But if you want X, Y, and Z benefit, there it is. There's that option. And then you can make the pitch again at the end. Hey, book a call, the link below. Again, that's the whole point of a webinar. The point is you're offering them something value live, you're engaging with them, but you're also there to sell a product. If you're not selling something on a webinar, why are you even doing the webinar in the first place? All right, so the fundamentals of email marketing. A lot of people overcomplicate this, or they do a lot of the fundamentals wrong. So let's just go over the basics here. I recommend you use kit.com or berserkermail.com. Those are the two best email softwares out there, in my opinion. I've used a lot of them. I've used MailChimp. I've used ActiveCampaign. I've used Constant Contact. I've used pretty much everything. There's a lot of them that are great. Kit.com and Berserker Mail are the best. I don't make any money from recommending those, but go ahead and use one of those. Next, this is very important. You want to send from a business domain, for example, Bob at marketingwithbob.com. His website is Marketing with Bob, right? You do not want to send from some kind of Gmail account, right? I've worked with businesses that do this or have done this, and your deliverability is going to be terrible. If you're sending broadcasts from a Gmail or a Yahoo account or whatever, it's bad. It's bad news. So fundamentally, make sure you have some kind of custom domain that's attached to your website. Your deliverability will be a lot higher, which means your open rates will be higher. Now, next, you want to send text with your emails. Again, this is a mistake that so many business owners are making. They send emails that have a ton of graphics and images and logos, and they'll embed a video directly in it. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. If you want to get high open rates, you want to get into a lot of inboxes, make it plain text. And I know that it looks dull and boring, and you would think that it wouldn't get engagement if it was boring. But the way email works is counterintuitive. The more simple the email is, the more likely you're going to get sales and engagement from it, and you're going to get higher open rates and higher deliverability. So just leave out all the buttons and the logos and the graphics. Don't do any of that stuff. This is not a magazine. This is not a TV ad. It's an email. You want it to be plain text, very much like this document that you're seeing right in front of you right now. There's no images. It's just text. That's what you want in an email, in your email broadcast. Next is the subject lines themselves. I could go, I could make a 20-minute video about this specifically, but I don't want to overcomplicate this. Fundamentally, what you're trying to do with the subject line is what gets the email read. So you're trying to create a subject line that sparks curiosity about the contents of the email itself. And you can have ChatGPT help you out with this, but you just want something that piques curiosity, that makes them want to click the email. And then once they're in the email, your goal is to sell them on whatever your service is or your webinar. Next, I would say minimum one email per week. If you've got an email list, send one email per week, minimum. But I've worked with the companies before, and we've done extensive tests on this. And what we found is the more emails you send, the more money you make. It really is that simple. There's a couple of companies I've worked with where we literally send emails every single day, sometimes multiple times in a day if we're doing a big promotion. And it just always equates to more booked calls and more money. But if you don't want to spam them, so to speak, send 3 a week, right? Every other day or so, send 3 a week. And then next, fundamentally, it is good to segment your list, but I don't want you to worry about that if you're just kind of getting into email for the first time. Don't overcomplicate it. I went for years. There was a email list I was managing for years where we didn't segment anything. We just blasted the whole list with whatever offers we had. We didn't segment it for a long time. It didn't really fundamentally impact anything. It's something you can do later. I put this on this list of fundamentals because a lot of gurus and people online will say, like, segmentation is so important. No, it's not. It's not. It's something you can do later on down the road that will help you optimize your email list. It'll help you separate, people based on interests or based on what they've already bought in the past. It's not something you need to do initially, so don't worry about it. Okay, how to capture people's information, because again, you're driving people to a webinar. That's the lead magnet, but you want their contact information. So I would use something like System.io, which is on the screen. It's spelled like this. It has an E at the end. System.io. I don't make any money from recommending them. Or ClickFunnels. You can use ClickFunnels as well. System is free. It has all the same features as ClickFunnels. You just want to build a simple opt-in page, captures their name, their email, and their phone number. Now, phone numbers, I could go into a whole other presentation about this. A phone number, when you're sending text messages, it's very similar to email. It's just as powerful. It's a little bit more complicated to set up, though. There's a lot more rules and regulations on how you can send text messages and the software behind doing it. So I'm not going to go deep into that. But if you can capture the phone number, that's great. You could always use it later. And then number 3 here on how to capture information, your thank you page is a lot more important than you think it is. What I used to do when I first started running webinars is I would capture people's information, and then the thank you page would just be like, hey, thanks for signing up. That was it. It was like just a little blurb. Hey, thanks for signing up. That was it. And what we found was if we put more information on the thank you page, and more specifically, if we made it into a set of instructions on the thank you page, our engagement, our attendance rates for the webinars skyrocketed. So what we do now is we capture their information, drive them to the thank you page, and then thank you page says, thank you for signing up. Please follow these simple instructions. And it's usually like 3 steps. So step number 1, check your email and reply to the email, right? Step number 1. Step number 2 is watch this video. And usually the video is like a summary of why they need to show up to the webinar. And then step number 3 might be subscribe to the YouTube channel, right? We found that by just giving people a set of basic, simple instructions, it just massively improved the show up rate, the engagement rate, the email list deliverability, the open rates on the email list, because it's a call to action. It's like you're signing up, but that's not all. You're going to do this next set of steps, and it allows people to follow through to the next set of things. So I highly recommend you do that. All right, next, the pre-webinar marketing strategy. So you're going to do quite a lot of hype. In the 3 to 7 days leading up to the webinar, you're going to use your email list. You're going to leverage it. So if you're going to segment people, which you don't have to do, but if you did, you could, at this point, the people that actually registered, you could build a tremendous amount of hype. You want this event to be, it's an event. It's not just some YouTube video you're putting out. It's something you're building hype for. So what I like to do is each email will hit some kind of major point, like common questions, common pains, dream desires, and the urgency of why they need to show up. So each email, it covers a different point, one dedicated point per email. And then if you want to sort of sweeten the deal and boost your attendance rates even more, promise some kind of attendance gift. I found this was very effective with one of the clients that I was running webinars with. We promised a $3,000 gift. And this was just like a set of training videos and an ebook and then a discount on the coaching program. We put it all into a bundle and we said, anybody that attends the webinar and stays to the end, they get this $3,000 gift. And that helped boost our attendance rates quite significantly. So I recommend you do something like that. All right. So post-webinar, you've got your webinar, you've done your marketing, you've got your email marketing set up, you've got your presentation, you've already run the webinar. Now, post-webinar, what you can do is leverage your email list to sort of promote the recording, because a lot of people aren't going to show up to the webinar itself. This is where you find out, like, oh, I had 600 people register to this thing, but only 100 of them actually showed up, or only 50 of them showed up. That's very common with webinars. Even if you're really good at the marketing side of things, it's just what happens. People love registering and then just not showing up. Either something came up, or they forgot, or they just, like I said, they just love registering to stuff. You're going to find post-webinar, you're going to find out, my attendance rate was actually terrible. But that's why we set up an email list in the first place. The email list is to capture everybody permanently because, 80% of them don't show up, but they are now permanently in our ecosystem. So we can reach them with another webinar in the future or whatever future content and promotions we're running. So post webinar, run some emails promoting the recording. I like to make the recording exclusive. I like to, personally, I'll say, this recording is only available for 72 hours. The reason I do that is just like the webinar itself, there's a tremendous amount of urgency behind it. I want people to feel like if they don't attend this or they don't watch the recording within a limited amount of time, they'll never see it again. That significantly increases the chances they'll actually watch it. So create that urgency, get them to show up and watch the recording. And then next, you want to review your analytics. You've got open rates, you've got signups, you've got attendance rates, you've got calls booked, you've got sales, etc. The only way you can improve something is by tracking it, right? So what I like to do is I actually have a whole spreadsheet where I break this down. I have the date that I ran the webinar. I have the amount that I spent on ads if you're running ads, the number of people that actually attend or registered rather, and then the number of people that actually attended of those people. And then I even put a percentage because it's just a little bit easier to track. And then the cost per lead, calls booked, cash collected, return on ad spend. Again, you can't improve something unless you're tracking it. So the only way that I know that I'm improving my webinars over time is because I actually have all of these stats tracked out. I don't put a tremendous amount of emphasis on it because there is some variance that happens, but like attendance rates is the perfect thing. If you're using Webinar Jam it tracks attendance rates, but you don't know if you're improving it unless you're keeping up with that. You want to make sure you're boosting because even a 5% boost in your attendance rate can significantly impact how much money you end up collecting in the webinar. So I recommend you track it. You can improve it. That's the presentation, guys. I appreciate you watching. Email marketing combined with webinars. It's the dynamic duo that very few people are leveraging. I've been using it. I've made literally I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last year from webinars. And I'm going to keep putting out content, teaching people how to do this type of stuff. So hit subscribe if you found this useful. If you have any questions, comment down below. And I appreciate you watching.